You will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Zionist war machine is continuing to wreak havoc in the Palestinian territories, causing so far more than 16,500 martyrs and over 4,000 or 40,000 wounded, 70% of whom are children and women. The African Conference on Startups is continuing here in Al Abdelatif Rahal Conference Center in Algiers, with Algeria reaffirming its commitment to making its experience available to its African brothers. And today, Algeria commemorates the 62nd anniversary of the death of activist Frantz Fanon, who joined the ranks of the National Liberation Front in 1956. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, the toll of the Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip and the West Bank has risen to 16,050 martyrs and over 40,000 wounded, 70% of victims being children and women, said the Palestinian Health Ministry. This comes at a time when the Zionist occupying forces have extended their genocidal offensive towards the south of the Gaza Strip, carrying out deadly strikes against several towns where hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians have sought refuge since the start of the aggression. Said Bougazi has more details.
A number of airstrikes and artillery fire have targeted Khan Yunis and Rafah areas, as well as Deir el-Balah further north, after the deployment on Monday of dozens of tanks, troop carriers and bulldozers in the south of the territory, where the Zionist entity had invited Gazans from the north to go there because it had been declared a safe zone. The overnight strikes on two schools, Salah ad-Din and Shahid Asad al-Saftawi, in the Gaza Strip, which were being used as places of refuge by hundreds of Palestinians, resulted in at least 50 martyrs and dozens of injured, according to the Wafa press agency. Another bombing killed 24 people at a school in Khan Yunis, housing displaced persons and civilians trapped in a very small sector of the besieged territory. Palestinian Health Minister May El-Kaila underlined that the health situation had become catastrophic in the Gaza Strip, adding that 20 hospitals are now out of service due to the continued bombardment by the Zionist Air Force. She added in the same connection that the rate of operation hospitals in the south of the Gaza Strip exceeded 210%, and that there was a serious shortage of staff, medicines, medical supplies and fuel. Finally, the minister warned that the epidemic situation in refugee centers, schools and hospitals had reached catastrophic levels because of the serious shortages of water, food, medicines and hygiene supplies, which have led to the spread of diseases and epidemics among displaced people, with frightening figures.
And a strike by the Zionist occupier on a school housing displaced Palestinians resulted in the deaths of at least 25 of them on Tuesday alone in Khan Yunis, in the south of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian agency Wafa reported. And in the occupied West Bank, Palestinian youth succumbed today to his injuries sustained from Zionist forces' gunfire during a raid in the northern occupied west town of Tulkaram. The Ministry of Health said in a statement that Ahmed Nathmi Ghanem, 30, died to the wounds he sustained from Zionist gunfire about a week ago. More on the ongoing Zionist aggression on occupied West Bank towns with Said Bougazi.
Two Palestinian youths identified as Muaz Ibrahim Zahran, 23, from El Farah camp, and Abdul Rahman Imad Khalid Bani Ouda, 16, from the town of Tamun, were killed this morning by the occupation forces. With the killing of Ghanem, the number of Palestinians killed by Zionist occupation forces in the occupied West Bank since the beginning of 2023 has risen to 471, including 262 who were killed after October 7th. Four Palestinian youths were wounded Wednesday morning, one of them seriously, after they were shot by Zionist occupation forces in Balata camp east of Nablus. Wafa correspondent reported that Zionist occupation special forces broke into the Balata camp and surrounded a house in one of its neighborhoods, and as a result, confrontations broke out in the place. Ahmed Jibril, director of the Red Crescent Ambulance and Emergency Center in Nablus, said that a youth 25 was hit by a bullet in the flank and another in the head. His wounds were very critical. In another development, the occupation authorities announced that they decided to revoke the residence visa of UN humanitarian coordinator Lynn Hastings over her position concerning October 7th attack. Zionist Foreign Minister Eli Cohen said on X that Hastings cannot serve in the UN and cannot enter Israel. These came shortly after statements by Hastings, who said that the conditions required to deliver aid to the people of Gaza do not exist. Nowhere is safe in Gaza, and there is nowhere left to go, she added. The move to revoke Hastings' visa also came after growing criticism from the UN over the Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip, which has so far killed more than 16,000 Palestinians.
Meanwhile, dozens of fanatic Jewish settlers broke Wednesday morning into the compounds of Al-Aqsa Mosque under heavy protection from the Zionist occupation police. The extremist settlers, divided into groups, raided the Holy Islamic Mosque from the Al-Maghribiya gate and took provocative tours in its compounds, performing Talmudic rituals in the eastern part of it. The Palestinian Prisoners Club has said that the Zionist entity is holding 7,800 Palestinians in its prisons up to the end of November. The club said in a statement that the detainees include 33 women prisoners, 166 children, and 2,873 administrative detainees without any charge. The spokesperson of the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, said that last night 108 trucks carrying humanitarian supplies and about 69,000 liters of fuel entered from Egypt into Gaza, about the same as the previous day. This is well below the daily average of 170 trucks and 110,000 liters of fuel that had entered during the humanitarian pause that took place between 24 and 30 November.
Lynn Hastings, our humanitarian coordinator in the occupied Palestinian territory, pointed to the worsening scenario for the delivery of humanitarian aid. In particular, she noted that shelters have no capacity, the healthcare system is on its knees, and there is a lack of clean drinking water, no proper sanitation, and poor nutrition. We also issued a statement after the briefing on behalf of the Secretary General, calling on all parties to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law.
That was the spokesperson of the UN Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric. In his address to the African Startup Conference on Tuesday in Algiers, read on his behalf by Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi, the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, affirmed Algeria's commitment to make its experience in the field of startups available to its African brothers. Let's listen to him.
نؤكد لكم من هذا المنبر التزام الجزائر.
We affirm from this platform Algeria's commitment to making its experience in startups available to its African brothers and sisters through forums for the exchange of expertise, such as this important conference on startups. Because in this pioneering country, in the defense of Africa's interests, we are proud of the African militant legacy and believe in the imperative need to free our continent from the colonialist doctrine that feeds on the remnants of a bygone influence. In Algeria, a country faithful to its African heritage, we are attached to this belonging and to our glorious common militant history, which requires us to adopt a new and renewed African vision, aware of our common continental interests, in order to raise our continent to its rightful place in the context of current and future regional and international balances, and in a world undergoing increasing and extremely complex developments and changes.
President Tebboune called on African entrepreneurs and project leaders taking part in the conference to coordinate their efforts so as to integrate the concepts of startups, innovation, and entrepreneurship into the economic systems of African countries. And the Summit of African Ministers in charge of startups was held on Tuesday afternoon in Algiers, with 34 countries taking part, with a view to examining ways of developing this sector in Africa. This summit, organized as part of the second African Startup Conference being held from 5 to 7 December at the Abdel Rahal International Conference Center, aims to strengthen African cooperation in the field of startups and innovation in Africa, making it a priority for the continent, according to the organizers. Participants discussed the development of a unified African strategy to reduce the brain drain and facilitate the mobility between African countries, in addition to the project presented by Algeria to deal with this phenomenon. Organizations representing Algerian journalists have welcomed the measures decided by the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, in favor of the national media in the form of indirect aid, saying that they were part of a strong and real political will to promote the sector and support the media guild. The National People's Assembly has adopted by a majority the draft finance law for the 2024 financial year, which provides for expenditure of over 15,275 billion dinars, 18% of which is earmarked for public investment. The vote took place in a plenary session chaired by Speaker Brahim Boughali in the presence of Finance Minister Aziz Faid and members of the government. And the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, Mary Lawler, described her visit to Algeria on Tuesday as fruitful while praising the government of its efforts to facilitate the visit. I would first of all like to sincerely thank the government for its invitation and for the extraordinary efforts that were made to facilitate the fruitful visit, she said at a press conference during which she gave an overview of the report she will be submitting to the UN Human Rights Council in March 2025. And the head of United Nations climate talks COP28 underway in Dubai insisted that there is no silence to support phasing out fossil or science to support phasing out fossil fuels to avoid catastrophic warming. For his part, the Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, stressed that climate change requires addressing the issue of fossil fuels.
Addressing climate change necessitates addressing the role of fossil fuels. Much like we cannot discuss lung cancer without acknowledging the impact of tobacco. It's undeniable. Some people tell me, why do you say fossil fuel? Because fossil fuel is one of the contributors to the emission. And why don't you say just carbon emission? Then I say to them, when carbon fuel, that's oil, gas and coal combined contributes more than 75%, why can't we name that major contributor? Why do we combine it with the rest? If you combine it, where do you focus? And without addressing the 75%, achieving the 1.5 degree centigrade limit is ballooning.
COP28 is the UN's latest round of global climate talks. This year is held in Dubai and is attended by 160 world leaders, including the Pope and King Charles III. Today we commemorate the 62nd anniversary of the death of psychiatrist, writer and anti-colonialist activist Frantz Fanon, who joined the ranks of the National Liberation Front in 1956. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatric writer and anti-colonialist activist from Martinique. Frantz Fanon left his mark on the 20th century through his thought and action, despite a short life afflicted by illness. Frantz Fanon studied at the Faculty of Medicine in Lyon and was appointed chief physician at the Blida Psychiatric Hospital in 1953. In 1952, he had already published Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, Black Skin or White Marks. Saad Bougazi had back to the main stages in the short life of this extraordinary anti-colonialist activist, and this will be followed by the international event of the week. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you.
The psychiatrist and anti-colonialist activist Frantz Fanon was born on 20th July 1925 in Fort-de-France in Martinique. His father was a customs inspector and his mother a shopkeeper, both from the area's mixed-race petty bourgeoisie. Together they had 8 children, 6 of whom survived to attend secondary school. Fanon was a pupil at the Lycée Schœlcher, where Aimé Césaire was a teacher. In 1943, at the age of 18, Frantz Fanon joined General de Gaulle's Free French Forces via Dominica. His experience of the army was mixed. Although he joined full of patriotism, he experienced racism and was seen as an undisciplined soldier, but fought bravely in the battles to liberate France. He then returned to Martinique, where he obtained his baccalaureate in 1946. Thanks to a grant, he went to study medicine in Lyon, where he specialized in psychiatry while taking courses in literature and philosophy. In 1952, he published Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, Black Skin, White Masks, based on his doctorate in psychiatry, in which he explored notions of identity, assimilation, and racism against black people, based on his experience as a West Indian born in Martinique and living in France. In 1953, he became head physician at the Blida Psychiatric Hospital in Algeria. Confronted with the injustices of colonial society and the neuroses of the population suffering from them, he developed methods for treating the psychological effects of the colonial system on the colonized, in particular depersonalization and dehumanization. When the Algerian Liberation War broke out, he treated French soldiers by day and FLN fighters by night. In 1956, he resigned his hospital post to join the ranks of the FLN. A few weeks later, he was deported to Tunisia. Henceforth claiming to be Algerian, he represented the independence fighters in Africa and wrote some of the most influential texts of the anti-colonialist movement, such as L'Enseigne de la Révolution Algérienne, or The Fifth Year of the Algerian Revolution in 1959, and Les Damnés de la Terre, or The Wretched of the Earth in 1961, with a preface by Jean-Paul Sartre. He died of leukemia in Washington on 6 December 1961 without seeing the Algerian independence, for which he had given everything in the last years of his life. Frantz Fanon's highly personal approach to questions of identity, race and domination was nourished by his experience as a psychiatric doctor and uprooted West Indian and an anti-colonialist activist. His writings have been constantly reread and rediscovered since their publication, and Frantz Fanon has become an international herald for the armed struggle for independence, a pioneer of post-colonial studies, and a critical thinker of black identities in the face of societal racism.
The international event of the week.
More Palestinians, including women and children detained in Israeli jails, were released this week as part of the truce deal agreed on by the Israeli occupying authorities and the Palestinian Hamas movement. The 4-day pause in fighting was extended by 2 days to allow for the release of more Palestinians and for the delivery of a much-needed aid to the population in Gaza. Meanwhile, talks held in Doha under Qatar's mediation continue to try and reach a possible extension of the temporary ceasefire. In this respect, Qatar's foreign ministry said the mediators hoped they could build on the extension to secure the release of more detainees and prepare the ground for a more sustainable truce. Asked if the Israeli government would agree to and abide by a more sustainable truce as it vowed to carry on its military operations in Gaza. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had this to say.
All indications show otherwise. The Israeli resumption of aggression on the Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank is a clear indication that the Zionist state has no intention of giving peace a chance. The leadership declaration to resume the war after the temporary ceasefire are a strong evidence of how they approached the truce period. The Israeli leaders did not leave doubt that they would resume their inhuman bombardment on Gaza the moment the truce was over. True to their words, the Zionist army embarked on another genocide, killing and injuring hundreds of civilians in the last 3 days. Sources report that the Israeli presence in Gaza is an open-ended question, with some speculation that the defense forces would continue their atrocities for at least 3 months. Others predict that it will be until January, based on report that the United States gave them until that time, in an anticipation of increased international pressure or for fear the war would drag into the election campaign period in the United States. What is clear is that there is a consensus that the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war cabinet have personal interest in prolonging this war, hoping for a win at all costs. This is for fear that maybe that there may be brought to justice once this is over. What's clear also is the fact that world opinion has shifted in favor of the Palestinians, as seen by what's widespread demonstration in the United States, Europe, and throughout the world. In addition, the Palestinian resistance has proven its resolve to defeat Israel. It has won the battlefield and the mind of the world opinion. Continuing the war will not stop this resolve or the resistance. It is this fact that will drive the Israelis to rethink their approach to Gaza and ultimately come to terms with peace with the Palestinians.
The truce extension was hailed by the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres as a major step, saying he hopes more humanitarian aid could enter the Gaza Strip. He described it as a glimpse of hope amid the darkness of war, at a time when UN agencies express concern at a deeper humanitarian crisis that may follow if Israel resumes its attacks on Gaza. The truce extension was also welcomed by US President Joe Biden, who stressed that it enabled a significant increase in the humanitarian assistance to the innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip, while reiterating that the US would continue to make efforts towards, as he put it, building a future of peace and dignity for the Palestinian people. Asked if the US president would push the Israeli government into changing its approach towards the Palestinians and agreeing to the two-state option, to which President Biden has always said he remains committed. Our political analyst commented the issue.
What is being proposed by the United States about the two-state solution at this juncture is vague at best and at worst out of touch with the reality of Gaza and West Bank. So far, the United States has presented no plans of its vision of the two-state solution. Rather, what we have seen is that the United States is looking for ways of how to establish a political order in post-occupation of Gaza. It is in this context that the visit by the Secretary of State and Vice President included visits with Arab leaders who they think they will get their support, the United States support, in its search for a solution that will include a control of the political order in Gaza in post-occupation. In retrospect, the United States and Israel might differ in the form of the two-state solution or its shape, but they agree fundamentally that they agree that they share that the shape and form of any Palestinian state is secondary to the protection of the Jewish state national security, and which is aligned with that of the United States. As the Secretary of Defense stated recently, the United States' support for Israel is outside any negotiation and will never happen, and that they would not allow Hamas to win. Such statement reflects the mind of the U.S. leadership in pushing for a two-state solution, which means the United States plan will not allow for the establishment of a viable and sovereign state, and further will reject, as they did before, any fair and inclusive Palestinian elections. Or to suggest that these propositions will not be supported by any Palestinians, including the resistance movement, who are calling for a viable state and allowing or letting the Palestinians decide their fate and their future.
This week, a group of lawyers representing Palestinian victims of Israel's attacks on Gaza filed a complaint to the International Criminal Court, ICC, arguing that Israel's actions amount to the crime of genocide. The complaint was submitted to the court's prosecutor by the victims' representative, who assured that although Israel was not a member of the ICC, it would not render the court ineffective. Asked if the initiative that could result in arrest warrants to be issued by the court could be carried through, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi said,
"This is correct. This court initiative could result in arrest warrant against those who are found guilty of crimes against humanity, which include collective punishment and genocide. The claims that the court will not do so are baseless, because Israeli leaders will not be prosecuted for the fact, according to them, the Jewish state is not a member, are ill-founded. And these claims are designed to derail this effort by trying to project a false image to the public at large in an effort to undermine the public support for this case. However, it is correct that the ICC has no jurisdictions over crimes committed fully in a non-member state, in this case Israel. The ICC, however, has the jurisdiction over crimes against humanity and genocide committed in any country in the world, and in this case, the state of Palestine, and regardless of who commits them. And in this respect, despite objection in a 2014 case in Gaza against Israel, the ICC ruled to investigate because the case falls under the Rome Statute, and which confers Palestine is a state and Gaza is within its boundaries. It's highly likely that this precedent will be enough for the court to accept the case and begin investigating its merits. This is to say also that the court is